Hello, I'm Dave Gordon, the Sacramento County Superintendent of Schools. And on behalf of SCOE and our Board of Education, welcome to our California Dyslexia Initiative Conference. Our conference is presented in partnership with the California Department of Education, the State Board of Education, and the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence. Our county office leads the Dyslexia Initiative in order to build capacity and resources across California's educational systems in order to address the needs of struggling readers and students with dyslexia. The CDI is developing educator resources, including videos, articles, webinars, and professional development modules to foster a deeper understanding of dyslexia and to support students with learning difficulties. This CDI conference is another way we are accomplishing our goal of spreading knowledge and resources. We have over 2,500 people registered for this exceptional two-day opportunity for teachers, administrators, school district and site staff, and many other educational partners. Over the next 2 days, we will have the honor of learning from our expert keynote speakers, Dr. Maryann Wolf, Dr. Elsa Cardenas-Hagen, and Dr. Yulia Kovalman. You won't want to miss a minute of their presentations. During the conference, we'll also have over 60 breakout offerings to choose from, ranging from understanding dyslexia to supporting multilingual learners to supporting struggling readers in an MTSS framework. There are also sessions on literacy leadership, screening, assessment, and early intervention, special education, and much more. There's something for everyone. I hope you enjoy the conference. Thank you for being here, and above all, thank you for your continued commitment to supporting all students and supporting the needs of struggling readers and students at risk for and with dyslexia.
Well, thank you, Superintendent Gordon. Good morning, everyone. I'm Tammy Wilson. I'm the project lead for the California Dyslexia Initiative, and I am really excited to welcome over 2,500 educators and partners from across California, and I understand internationally, to learn with us today. We have an amazing 2 days planned for you, with morning keynotes and 4 breakout sessions each day for attendance. With so many wonderful speakers to choose from, we know it was difficult for you to build your agenda, but the good news is almost all sessions are being recorded, and you can access them right here on the platform starting early next week. They'll be available through mid-July. So many of you made your breakout session selections and built your schedule on the platform. You'll be able to navigate to everything through the Your Schedule links on the homepage and the sessions link in the menu. Be sure to visit the vendor booths on the left menu because we'll be giving out raffle prizes throughout today for anyone who is live attending the sessions, courtesy of their generosity. If you chat with a vendor, you'll also get a secret code to use in the Play to Win challenge. Over the 2 days, we're giving away over $6,000 worth of prizes, including gift cards, teaching materials, books, and even AirPods. 100 attendees each day will win free books for live attendance. Just watch the chat in the keynote each morning for the Google link to enter to win. Watch the conference feed for announcements of winners, and if you win, you'll be notified via email. We already have our first winners. The winners of the Show Us Your Smile for having their profile pick up and their schedules built. Helen Apthorpe, a $50 Starbucks gift card, courtesy of Hand to Mind. And Lisa Wong, a $100 Amazon gift card, courtesy of Lexia Learning. Tomorrow, we will announce a $200 Teacher Pay Teacher gift card winner. There's still time. Update your profile and be eligible to win. Keep an eye out today for the activity challenges through the announcements and the Play to Win link on the left menu. You'll earn points and you can win prizes. We have breaks built into the day, so be sure to take a stretch break and get comfortable so that you can come back and learn more with us. Okay, that's enough for the announcements because I am really excited to introduce today's amazing keynote, Dr. Maryann Wolf. Dr. Wolf advocates endlessly for children and literacy around the world. She directs UCLA's Center for Dyslexia, Diverse Learners, and Social Justice, and she has received the highest awards from the International Dyslexia Association. She has authored over 170 publications and books, including Proust and the Squid, The Story and Science of the Reading Brain, Dyslexia, Fluency in the Brain, Tales of Literacy for the 21st Century, and Reader Come Home, The Reading Brain in a Digital World. She was elected to the Pontifical Academy of Science, which she regards as her highest honor. Her keynote today is titled Lessons for All Children from Research on Dyslexia and the Reading Brain. The Q&A is open, so if you have questions, please add them, and if any time is available, we will get to some of the top questions. Without further ado, I am so excited to introduce and welcome and learn from the amazing Dr. Maryann Wolf.
Thank you, Tammy, so very much. It is an absolute pleasure for me to thank you and SCOE and all the people who work there, who are our friends and colleagues. And very importantly, I want to welcome all of you who are participating in this conference. It is a joy that I can't exaggerate to know that this many people are doing all of this work for our children. And our children with dyslexia teach us about all other children. I'm going to now share my screen and we will begin a quite, I would say, demanding view from you about what I will call the history and the beauty of our research on the reading brain and dyslexia. Now, I'm going to be giving 7 lessons in this very interestingly short amount of time. For you, it will be long, but for me, it will be short because I'm going to try to synthesize both something of the history of science of reading, the development of the reading brain, and then a look backwards, back to the earliest moments when dyslexia was discovered to this moment in time, and give you principles, lessons that we have learned across time that connect dyslexia and the reading brain. And finally, I'm going to give you tools that come from the work that I do with the most wonderful group of people at the Center for Dyslexia, Diverse Learners, and Social Justice, and the collaborative, this new collaborative on neuroscience, diversity, and learning. And you will see that name 7 other times in this conference because Laura Reinhardt, Jenny Grammer, Sue Sears, my dear colleague from CSUN, who's doing one on social justice right afterwards, and then the woman whose name I love to say, Mary Lou Gorno Tempini, will be giving lectures during this whole conference. So this collaborative is well represented, and you will be hearing from us, not just in the next 2 days, but through our modules with Sue Sears and our group. You will be, I hope, benefiting from how all of us can work together. Now, the first lesson is one that we all share, and that is that literacy is a basic human right. But what people not necessarily understand is that new invention, it's new to the species, it's only 6,000 years old, that transforms our brain. And when our brain is transformed, our life trajectory is transformed. And that has implications for our society as large as the future, literally, of our democracy depends on all of us being able to bring our best thinking and our understanding to bear in our societies. Now, the context I want to give you may be, I hope, interesting to some of you who think, when we talk about reading, we're talking about written language, but we're also talking about language itself. So I want to give you a kind of philosophical, literary context for how we begin this beautiful set of days. And that is to recognize what a gift language itself is. And I chose Gustave Flaubert to just give one thought about language and then one thought about written language to prepare our minds for what this extraordinary gift really is to our species. And Flaubert said this: language is that cracked kettle we beat upon for bears to dance to, all the while we long to make music that will move the stars. Now, I use this because I want us to remember what an important gift our species has in language itself, in all its complexity, because language gives us a drive to express and articulate our best thought. And written language gives us a way, a symbolic system for always going further and further. And I use Hermann Hesse's amazing essay on the living word. And that's what reading, written language is. It is words brought to life with lives underneath them. And he said this: all life longs for language. Deep intuitions wish to surface, find words, always evolving our forms of understanding. And that's what I want you to think about with all of our discussion about dyslexia. As you look behind me, this is the painting of my dyslexic son. And I will tell you that he has different forms of understanding. I am not only a researcher, I am a mother, and I know what it is to unleash the potential of every child. And that's a different form of understanding sometimes than linear brains like my own and probably a lot of yours. But the reality is written language helps release that potential. And we want that for every child. Now, the second lesson comes closer to my, if you will, my professional home. And that is that research on the science of reading that is connected to the reading brain and dyslexia is not just for our children who have dyslexia or any struggle. Knowing about this body of knowledge helps us teach all children. Now, science of reading has become au courant in our world. A lot of people are talking about it, using its principles, but I want to say that I am going to step on a few toes right this minute and say that the reality is that the science of reading is larger, broader, more historically rich and deep than sometimes it's being translated now as only phonics and phoneme awareness, which are absolutely crucial for us, but that need to be contextualized in a larger way with all that the science of reading has taught us. And so I want to say first from the start, does the science of reading solve every issue? Of course not. But it can help us teach more children, and it can help us reveal what teachers need to know about all our children. So I wanted to give a more historical view to what the science of reading includes. And I begin with neuroscience and my teacher, Norman Geschwind, and his students, who were also my teachers, Al Galaberta and Martha Denkla. And they contributed the beginnings of a whole line of research that I will be talking a little bit up to you about, and many of the other researchers in the conference will as well. In education, all the way back to the 1960s and 70s, Jean Chaw at the Harvard Reading Lab, who was also my teacher, made us aware that there was always going to be this tension between those who have a more structured literacy approach in decoding as its main emphasis versus those in those days in whole language than in balanced literacy. And she said this tension is going to last a long time, and she could not be more correct. But she said, we have the data. And that's another piece of the science of reading, looking at the data. And then another piece is the linguistics and psycholinguistics history. And that's Carol Chomsky, also my teacher. This is aging me, but this is a beautiful way of understanding that we have all of these strains of disciplines, and psycholinguistics with the Liebermans and Shankweiler and Carol Chomsky, and then the work of Reed Line and Peggy McCardle at NICHD that said, take that research, take all of it and make it alive in the classrooms. Make it so that we can teach every teacher, help us to teach every child, regardless of all the factors that influence them. And so 20 years ago, or a little bit more, we had the reading panel with wonderful people like Linnea Airy and Joanna Williams, and they gave us what we called the 5 pillars of what every teacher should be using. And all of us have used this in some form, but I want to tell you, we in the last 20 years have been going beyond each of these, broadening them, deepening them. And so what I want today to show you is that how those 5 pillars, in particular in 3 areas, have been expanded. And that expands our understanding of foundational skills. It expands our understanding to go beyond phoneme awareness, to go into the other language processes that Claude Goldenberg and I are always saying are so important. Those often thought of as oral language, but they are written language processes as well that must be understood and activated. Semantics, syntax, morphology. And then an understanding of fluency goes so beyond what that early research on fluency was about. And we'll go into a tiny bit of detail on that. And then finally, how does it all come together in an automatic, fluent way to deepen our understanding of comprehension? And so my first premise, if you will, is that we have used this very multidisciplinary science that is infusing how we teach today, that goes beyond those 5 pillars and goes beneath them. Now, I always use Stanislaus Dehaene because he says everything better than I do, but he said this about how we can use the reading brain circuitry. He said, parents and educators must have a better understanding of what reading changes in a child's brain. I'm convinced that increased knowledge of these circuits will greatly simplify the teacher's task. So part of my excitement about speaking to you today is that some of you have heard me, but many of you haven't. And I want to make this one moment in time, make you excited about the fact that reading made a brand new circuit of existing circuits that were already there for language and cognition and perception and affect. Now, I say that because some of you, most of you haven't read my first book, Proust and the Squid, Story and Science of the Reading Brain. And so you never heard me say or read that we were never born to read. Now, this sounds like the simplest epiphany, but it's one of the most beautiful epiphanies that both Stanislaus Dehaene and I have talked about as undergirding the fact that what we have in reading is a new and plastic circuit that can change and reflect the writing system. And I'm so pleased that there are people from around the world, because all of you will, from your own languages, know that the reading brain is somewhat different. It activates some of the same areas universally, but then it activates more of some parts than others. But there's 2 other things that happen, especially these days. And though my 6th lesson will be very quickly about how the digital circuit is changing. The digital reading is changing that circuit too in its emphases. But very important for today, how we teach is also influencing that circuit. And that circuit is something that I need us to realize, or the circuit of circuits. Mary Lou Gordon Tiffany always says, it's plural, and of course it is. But what I want you to think about is, what are those underlying circuits that contribute to the whole in the young reading brain? Because what that child has to do is connect those underlying processes in language, perception, cognition, and affect. That's their job and ours. And the more we know about it, the better we are going to teach. And I always use this awful acronym, not awful, I love possums, but Reed Lyon always told me that I should never use that garbage eating ugly marsupial. But I do, because it's a good acronym for you to remember these underlying processes. And the child and the teacher's job is to know that we must be developing each component process. Phoneme awareness, almost all of you know it's great importance, because the alphabetic principle has to put the phoneme, the sounds within the word, together with letters. So we need absolutely, whatever the first language, second language, third language, we need those phonemes to be represented. And they have to, in turn, be connected to the orthographic patterns in any writing system. And here we have to have representations of letters, and a lot of the work by people, and in fact, Jason Yateman in the conference will be talking about the importance of understanding the visual contributions to orthographic, what Lene Arias calls orthographic mapping. So we have much to absolutely put together to get that understanding of the alphabetic principle, but that's also a conceptual process as well. It's phonemes, it's letters, but it's also the concept that the children have to learn, that words are made of sounds, and the sounds can be represented by letters. But very, very importantly, as Connie Jewell always said, one of the mistakes we can make is to think that if a child decodes a word that they know it. And so whether it's 0 to 5 or 5 to 10 or 10 to 99, the importance of the semantic development of the networks, and that goes beyond vocabulary. But semantic awareness is understanding how words are connected to each other, and how some of them are in opposition to each other, and some of them can have multiple meanings, and that's polysemy. All that's in the semantic area that has to be growing alongside all these other processes. One of the more neglected areas, and here is my dear teacher, Carol Chomsky, always made us really think about this, the importance of syntactic development from 5 to 10. And it is not a lost cause that some of us who learned how to diagram need to now give a different look to syntax, and to be absolutely aware of how a better understanding of grammatical forms and sentences and how sentences work helps fluency and comprehension. And as I said, understanding the words are made of sounds, and letters represent those sounds in our words and stories. This is an important conceptual aspect of understanding. And then my secret sauce process is morphology. And here I just want you to realize that morphemes give 3 different clues, if you will, to what a word contains. The very simplest 4 morphemes in first grade represent 60% of the words with morphemes. So just beginning, but to give the sense of what a morpheme does, it gives you an orthographic chunk, makes the words that are long much more readable, if you will, but it also gives syntactic information and semantic information. So together, all these processes represent the parts the possum parts of our foundational skills that we need to be thinking about as we think about applying the science of reading that goes well. It certainly includes phonics and phoneme awareness, but it connects them to what I want to call an expanded understanding of foundational skills. So we connect all of these in our work with children. It's each of them needs our developmental help as the teachers. And then as they become fluent, we connect them to what I will call deep reading comprehension. But the bridge is fluency. And here's where I'm going to give you what I call a 30-second look at the brain and fluency. And some of you who might have been at Plain Talk heard me give an hour version that I'm going to put in 30 seconds. But it's just to give you a tiny glimpse of all the things that contribute to fluency. And so this is Catherine Studley's drawings for me. Some of you know she's a cerebellum researcher, but I'm giving you a walking tour. Now you look at this brain and you will see that what we're going to do is just in 30 seconds, look at all the systems that contribute to fluency. Attention, the visual system, and as I said, Jason Yateman will be talking to you about the beautiful complexity of the visual system and how it represents those letters in our visual word form area. But then we have to connect those with our phonemes and our words. So all these connections are all the components and their connections are important. And finally, we are really making sure that when you think about fluency, you are not neglecting the semantic, syntactic, and morphological knowledge bases of the children. And just for you who are in neuroscience, we want to make sure you also realize how important that cerebellum, that little brain in the back, is to any of the processes that require precise timing. Now, if you put all this together, you have the basis for a fluent set of foundational skills and their connection to what I'm going to be calling deep reading. Now, when I said there's an expanded understanding of comprehension, what I mean by that is that a lot of us are looking beneath the surface of what we call comprehension. And I will only talk about 3 of these processes, but I want you to think about the fact that when we comprehend, we are putting together very sophisticated comprehension processes. We're putting together what the child or what the individual brings to bear in their background knowledge. And that's really important today because there's an over-reliance on, let's say, Google or any other search mechanism, instead of understanding that children need to have the background knowledge to know what they don't know. And so this is a really important part of our entire educational system. And my colleague and dear friend, Alberto Manguel, who wrote A History of Reading, really emphasizes that everything we read is cumulative and adds to that background knowledge that a child brings. One of the most important aspects of reading is sometimes the least, if you will, emphasized, and that its ability to transport us, to take us out of ourselves and pass over into the lives and thoughts and even feelings of others. This is perspective taking of alternative viewpoints, alternative lives. Fiction certainly is like our researchers in Canada telling us, like giving a piece of another person's consciousness. But the novelist Junot Diaz said this best: the novel fiction is the closest to telepathy we can come. This is the beginning in our children of empathy. The stories we read before they ever come into the kindergarten door, the stories they read after they learn to read. This is essential that we really understand that empathy is one of the great contributions. And then when I'm only, as I said, going to look at 3 of these underlying processes, But when we put them all together, when we make analogies, when we make inferences from what we know to what is new in front of us, when we have a more empathic understanding of another person's viewpoint, we have the basis for critical analysis, for analyzing and evaluating. Now, I can't emphasize this enough, even though my talk will not be about the digital brain more than 2 minutes at the end. I want you to realize that critical analysis and empathy are sophisticated, time-intensive processes. And by time-intensive, I mean our brain, when we're reading at that level, gives extra milliseconds to discerning and evaluating the truth of what we are reading. In this moment in time, when we are bombarded by misinformation and even disinformation, it is essential that our young learn to discern and evaluate the truth. That is what critical analysis allows us to do, and that's essential to comprehension. Now, when we put all that together, we have what I would call the deep reading brain. And that's an amazing, wonderful feat. But I want to take it apart for a few minutes and say, how do we teach it? And we teach it. I've written this. Tammy has a copy of my first attempt to write a paper called Elbow Room. And this is a really important thing to say to those of you who've never had this information before, or who've been not trained on any of the reading brain or foundational skills, or perhaps that you have been trained in balanced literacy or whole language. And for you, I say there is a place for everyone here, but everyone, I believe, has something to learn. And Elbow Room gives me a way of saying this. And please, if you want to laugh, please go ahead and laugh. But this is how I'm trying to help people understand. Our rich foundational skills, that possum, is always connected to text. So people who are really mostly looking at text and stories, what I'm suggesting for all teachers is that we are developing these automatic foundational skills, but always applying it to text. Then as this becomes fluent and automatic, decoding, etc., these foundational skills take, if you will, second place. They're always there because syntax is always increasing, words are always increasing. But these processes of text, deep reading, take precedence. And so those of our teachers who are well-trained here, what we need is to expand their understanding of this. And for all of us, we need to encourage the connections to the richness of language and written language in text and story. And that information, that set of connections, I believe helps us who are involved in the science of reading always have the ways to connect to all teachers. It requires expansion of knowledge by everyone, but it also requires a real understanding of our child's individual characteristics. And so here is where we look at language variation. My dear friends, Elsa Cognis-Hagen and Julia Kobelman will be talking so much about language variation, Julie Washington, and the richness of the cultural background that our children bring. All of this needs to come together as we teach. Now, there are a few principles that I want to derive in this moment as we move into the next section, which will be on dyslexia. But I wanted to give you, if you will, just about I've given you 7 lessons. I'm going to give you 7 principles really fast. First, be sure that 0 to 5 period is developing each of those components. And I can't speak enough about the social emotional aspects of all of this. And my dear colleague, Rebecca Gottlieb, has written so beautifully on this. But by about 5, we have the ability to look at those possum skills that the children are bringing. And that's what our screeners like Multitudes and our UCSF and Mary Lou Gorno-Tempini's colleagues. They're such a wonderful group here in California. But whatever screener one uses, it has to be able to have the ability to look at the underlying processes of reading. And that in turn, with our understanding of the individual's cultural and language characteristics, helps us teach better. It helps us give more targeted. It's not a diagnosis. No, no, no. It is a way of giving us a profile of information that will help us teach better in a more targeted way. And that's especially important, as I'll show you in some data a little later, because the earlier the intervention, the more targeted the intervention to the needs of the child, the better the instruction is going to be. And the fourth principle is what everyone here I know has heard 100 times at least. We need evidence-based instruction that has data from peer-reviewed journals, if you can possibly get that. And that gives us the basis for understanding how we go after those expanded foundational skills and lead to truly fluent text comprehension. But along the way, principle 5, we are monitoring the progress, not by test, but by understanding where the child is doing so that they do not get, if you will, arrested in a particular kind of intervention or not sufficient intervention. So we need these MTSS models that will be very much a part of this conference in our differential instruction. Finally, or almost finally, we have to really understand that by grade 4, we want fluent comprehending children. You know, the NAEP scores are showing that only 1/3 of our kids in 4th grade and 8th grade are reaching proficiency. That's what I mean by fluent comprehension. They aren't reaching that. We have to ensure 2 things: that we are working on that before 4th grade, and that between 4th and 8th graders, we don't neglect them, that we give more professional development to our teachers about dyslexia and about struggling readers in general, so that we know what to do instead of having the children often. And this is really part of our work too in the Bench to School initiative and the collaborative. We need to be sure that they do not follow the wrong pathway to the juvenile justice system, which so often happens. I can't tell you enough about how we have to be sure that we are not letting any child fall into the detritus of failure in that 4th to 8th grade. We need to keep working. And so collectively, this is the 7th principle. The collective insights are simply that we need explicit, systematic instruction in expanded foundational skills that are connected to deep reading processes. And when you do that, you are after that whole amazing reading brain. Now, the next section of my talk is about dyslexia. And here, I know this is the kind of slide that you should never, ever use. I know that. And I'm going to ask Tim Odegaard for forgiveness, but this is a précis of our article. These are a lot of the people you see there are going to give you talks here. And also they're part of our collaborative. And we were asked by Tim, among quite a few different people, to contribute an article about what should the new conceptualization of dyslexia be. And that's such a brilliant contribution by Tim to our field. And so our group decided to do 2 things. One, look at the historical, the history of dyslexia and the various attempts that have been made to explain it. And also to take the reading brain as our way of understanding what that next, if you will, definition should include. And Charlie Haynes and Malt Yoshi are spearheading that initiative for IDA. But we have 7 principles that I would like to suggest that we all think about as we move into a broader, better conceptualization of dyslexia. First, it's a unique brain organization. And we need to begin with that statement for all our children. It's influenced by genetics, it's influenced by neural development and environment. And very importantly, it has no relationship to intelligence. One of the hardest things that I've ever had to confront with my son and with all his friends and with all of the children and individuals, some of whom are 50 and 60 years old, one of the things that has haunted them is that an indicator that they are less intelligent than others? It is absolutely no relationship. It's a bell-shaped curve. If anything, I've learned quite a bit about all these variations, and it is an extraordinary waste of one of our most beautiful, unique brain organizations when we fail to give that individual their fair shot at releasing their potential to all of us. Now, the unexpected difficulties, accuracy, fluency, reading, spelling, comprehension, that's like what everybody would say, but not everybody would say that there are common predictors that will give us different profiles. And here we say that there are, obviously our two best predictors are phonological processes like phoneme awareness and naming speed. But what we really want to emphasize is that there is heterogeneity in the dyslexia, in our children and individuals with dyslexia. They can have executive, orthographic, attentional issues that are comorbid, but they can also have multiple loci. And I know Jason will be speaking about that in his talk. But altogether, we want you to realize there is heterogeneity that goes well beyond that early definition that only looked largely at phonological processes. Very important, and I will say this in Principle 4, different writing systems will give you almost a glimpse of that heterogeneity, because different writing systems will have different predictors, like naming speed will be a far better predictor for orthographically regular writing systems. So David Scher has given us a lot of food for thought about how English cannot be the only way we think about dyslexia. And very importantly, Hugh Katz, Petcher, and Young-Suk Kim and others are really showing us that there are risk and protective factors that are so important, including language variation and including the quality of teaching. This is so essential for you to realize. The quality of teaching will affect the prognosis of our children with dyslexia. And social emotional issues, I can't emphasize enough. One of the hardest parts of my life was to have one of my most beloved students commit suicide in high school because he felt a failure because of dyslexia. I never want to hear that again. And I want all of us to realize that we have a beautiful job of protecting humanity when we teach our individuals with dyslexia over time and keep them at the fore of our thinking when we're teaching. Number 6, this is very obvious. With explicit early intervention, we can make every child, almost every child, okay, I've had some of my failures, but almost every child we can teach to learn to read, and therefore prevent these terrible sequelae like social emotional issues, depression, etc., dropout, delinquency. We need never to hear these estimates of projected prison beds based on 3rd grade reading. We are warriors in this field to protect our children. And finally, very importantly, we want to emphasize the strengths. Look at that. I mean, I could take you around my home if I only had a few more minutes, and look at the amazing strengths of many of our children. Not everyone. And I know Tim Odegaard is always saying, don't you dare put any stereotype. I agree with that, but I also absolutely want to emphasize that we should be always, as a teaching field, looking at the protective factors like resiliency, persistence, and the strengths that every individual has. We have to find them, and we have to make sure our children feel good about themselves. Now, the other two things that we did in this rather, I think, interesting article for Annals of Dyslexia is we wanted to make sure that people understood how the reading brain develops. And so here's Catherine Studley's very colorful look at what the circuit is involving. Now I want you to do something very kind of interesting. I want you to look at the history of names of the hypotheses made for dyslexia. And if you look at them, Wortblindheit, word blindness was our first, and then auditory processing disorders. Now here's a picture of Samuel Orton, and his particular hypothesis was called strephalsymbolia. Now, and the next one was called amnesia visualis verbalis. I mean, we could be very happy it's come down to dyslexia. I would never want my son to have to say, I have amnesia visualis verbalis to his teachers. But the reality is, this is what I want you to look at. Look at these different hypotheses and the names. If you go from the earliest to the latest, you're going to do something very interesting. We go from word blindness, visual, to auditory, to lateralization, to different processing disorders, to multimodal, to a timing disorder, to phonological processing deficit, to my own. We've gone beyond my own, certainly, to the double deficit that was naming, speed, and phonological. And we have all, not we have all, but most of us have gone into what we look at as multiple loci that are underlying the heterogeneity. Now, what will happen if you map those hypotheses on the brain? And what you'll see is that they give you a rude but absolutely interesting different look at the reading brain circuit. In other words, if it can go wrong, one of the researchers in dyslexia has thought that was the source. And to me, this is testimony, this rather fun exercise intellectually. It's a fun way of actually looking at something very serious. And that is, when we look at our population of individuals with dyslexia, we see this broad heterogeneity. That doesn't mean we don't teach to a few of those areas that are most important. Absolutely, fluency, phoneme awareness, etc. But we have to understand there is heterogeneity and richness, if you will, in our children and individuals. And Ola Ozernoff-Palchik, John Gabrielli, Elizabeth Norton, so many of my friends and all of us, this was Ola's dissertation. And what they're actually finding is that we have these very important differences in our subtypes. And the only reason why I'm showing you this subtype here is because our early screening would be able to show it, but by and large, we would miss it. And this is the fluency group, or indexed by Maryann. And you see there's nothing that looks different about them except what will later become a fluency issue. And so I want to make a strong case for the fact that what Ola has found is that we have the smallest subtype was the pure phonology and working memory. And then the next group was the pure RAN indexed one, but the largest group was always a multiple different areas. And that leads us to the work by O'Brien and Yateman and by Katz and Petcher and Gottlieb, and a beautiful model by Hugh Katz has really looked at the very important role of risk factors with protective factors. And there will be more people in the conference talking about this, but we really want you to look at the big picture when we're thinking about how dyslexia and reading failure can be best understood. And our great colleague, Young-Suk Kim, has really given us all kinds of different research bases, both in bilingual children and in monolingual children, looking at what she calls the direct and the indirect effects that include areas like working memory, the effect of syntax or grammar, the effect of vocabulary or semantic knowledge. Now, I know that most of you have your, your favorite heroes of dyslexia. For me, I simply want you to realize there are so many great figures that have been some of our finest artists, finest architects, sculptors, and entrepreneurs. And here in California, our own Charles Schwab and our own governor, Gavin Newsom, whose wonderful children's book, it really talks about dyslexia. I want to say this not because we want every child to think they have to be an inventor or an artist, but because we need models that our children, when they are young and thinking, what can I do? Well, we have such an historical, a beautiful history of individuals who now more than ever are talking about their background in dyslexia. So I'm now moving us into what can we do? Here I've been talking to you in the first 4 lessons about the reading brain and an expanded version of foundational skills that expands our understanding of science of reading. But I want to talk to you, especially in this audience, about the implications of all this for intervention and instruction. And the first thing I will say, and some of you know I have my own intervention, there are no silver bullets. There are no one-size-fits-all interventions. And I need you to realize that I'm saying this as an author of interventions. So when I say that, it's because we need several goals in our interventions, and we need flexibility in how we address these goals in our individuals with their individual characteristics, whether that's language variation or the fact that they come to us from a very impoverished background. And I always talk about the role of equity in anything that we are doing in the educational system. We have to look at that as one of the very important factors. But if I'm asked, what do I think this collective information on the reading brain and dyslexia yields, there are 3 really important principles. First, I absolutely want all our interventions and instructions to go after the major areas of the reading circuit. That's those possum skills that are not just phonics and phoneme awareness, but really understanding the importance of orthographic patterns, the importance of semantic networks and prosody and polysemy, the importance of understanding how syntax can change your understanding of a sentence, how morphemes can change your understanding of the word, and that word can change the understanding of the story. So I want you to think about, very importantly, one of our jobs in teaching is to address those major parts of the circuit and connect them. So this is a really hard thing to think about, but I want you to be with me. We want to have automaticity within each component. We wanted them to be fast with understanding the knowledge of what a word in English is, as the language they're reading in this country, what that word means, how it changes in its grammatical form. Think only of the word track. That track can be a noun, an adjective, a verb. Now, we need to make sure our children know these aspects of semantics, syntax, and morphology. And we need them connected to each other. Now, we have, in our interventions, we have certain ways we connect them, but I need, whatever your intervention is, I need you to realize we need to, in most cases, go beyond what we have been doing. And then we need to connect it to text in more integrated ways. And we need to have an understanding of inference and analogy and what deep reading really is. And then absolutely, we need to connect it to the variation of our learners. We need to have flexibility through that comprehension monitoring and decoding monitoring. We are monitoring the circuit. And that's what we want our screener to be able to give us information. And then we teach, and then we monitor. And then we want our children to soar. Now, we have two lessons left, so I'm going to go pretty fast here. I want to give you examples. Now, I said that my colleagues and I from Robin Morris, and these are two of the finest researchers in anywhere in North America, Robin Morris, Atlanta, Maureen Love at Toronto. And thanks to Reed Line and Peggy McCartle, we were able to do more than a decade of both cross-sectional and longitudinal randomized controlled treatment intervention studies. And I'm not saying, and very importantly, I'm not saying use these interventions. I'm saying use the principles that we had within these interventions for you to think about how we best intervene with our children in this heterogeneity. And so this is what we call multi-component interventions. And what we did was we compared, when you add a very good systematic phonics program, when you add this multi-component dimension to it, we do better. And the multi-component nature is basically reverse engineering of the reading brain. So we're connecting all those parts. We're building fluency in the individual components, and we're building fluent connections, and then connections the same 2 days to text. So not 2 days go by without us connecting it to text. So in the process, we are teaching the children to use these expanded foundational skills and connect them to comprehension. Now, we use different strategies. I'm just going to say one. Ms. Mim teaches, she just happens to be the one I love most. I tried to imitate Bette Midler when we drew her, but basically she's teaching polysemy. That is, that a word can have as many meanings as she has legs. I'm giving you this as a tiny example. We can make all our work engaging, and we must. We really have to engage the whimsy of our children and make them have fun. Janine Heron and I and Margie Gillis, all of our Peaceniks group, are really trying to make sure that reading can be as engaging as possible, just as it is structured, explicit, and systematic. Now, we also want to make sure that all of you have some clues here to go beyond your possible work on comprehension and make sure that your thinking is including empathy and critical analysis in how you are teaching stories and how you are teaching comprehension. So we really want to, this happens to be T. Lex, another one of my favorites, and he gives all kinds of, if you will, cues to our students to think ahead, think back, very importantly, think for yourself. We want our children to realize we respect their intelligence and we want to elicit. Well, what we find in our data, and this is data that's new and data that's old, is that if you add this multi-component, that's the dark ones, you go well beyond just the systematic phonics. And we always include systematic phonics. That, please never make that mistake. But we go beyond it. We include it. And we have beautiful results that Journal of Educational Psych, Journal of Learning Disabilities, all of these journals. But we also had something really important that I want to emphasize right now. We go into in our longitudinal work with really a very important insight that the earlier we could get in and do our interventions, the better. We also, and this is a very important insight, and this thanks to Robin Morris, we also divided our groups into SES, socioeconomic status, IQ, and whether they were African American or Caucasian. Very, very importantly, we found that we had the same learning curve across all those dimensions. We still had a gap. I want no one to think we were able to make that achievement gap go away, but we were able to keep the learning going and going. And that's what's so important about our intervention. It's not a one-time thing. We continue that kind of intervention as long as we can. Lesson 6, I give 30 seconds to those of you who actually will win my book. Reader Come Home, The Reading Brain in a Digital World, will know that I'm really interested in understanding how we can teach our children through print, especially print in the first 10 years, but simultaneously increase their beautiful skills in digital and programming and coding that need, I believe, to always be there in a complementary fashion, but largely, I truly, I've got talks on this I can give some of you, but read it in the book. We really are, and the evidence has gone way beyond where my book was. We really know that digital exposure can do a job on the extra milliseconds that deep reading requires. And so we want to be sure that our children receive this teaching in the beginning in print as much as possible. And then our teachers able to teach deep reading across any medium. But now I want to give you probably the most important thing that I'm going to give you today. And that's something to take home. And that is the resource tools that our collaborative has been working on. I want to just call out Sue Sears and her task force from CSU and UC Systems. They have done an absolutely beautiful job of making modules. And these modules are aligned with the California Dyslexia guidelines. And I know my SCOE, there's so many people who are working on the TPEs. Oh my gosh, Nancy Brindleson and Becky. So there's so many wonderful people out there who are doing this work, but the modules is incorporating your work. I want you to know that. And Sue and I then edit every single word in the modules. But Sue is to be given the Herculean crown, if you will, for all her efforts in this, and with CAR-W especially. And you can look at the modules here, Introduction to Dyslexia, Dyslexia in the Brain, Screening and Assessment. Those are all done. Early childhood is almost done. And the last 3 will be done at the end of August. And Sue will give a wonderful seminar on that mid-August, if all goes well. And here, both Sue and I were working, especially on Standard 7, for those of you who know about the teacher performance expectations. And here's what the modules are really trying to do. They're trying to get at understanding those guidelines in a way that's very much suited to our pre-service teaching, but also our professional development. And we want to make sure these modules are available to everyone. But you see a lot of the Standard 7 that Sue and I worked on. And basically, I want you to know that this was an honor to work on that, because we were able to incorporate the foundational skills writ large. Now I'm going to end, and I'm ending as Tammy really wonderfully said. My greatest honor was to become a member of the Pontifical Academy of Science, and I've heard the Pope give talks often, and this is one from an essay that I just loved. Children are a sign. They are a sign of hope, of life, but also a diagnostic sign, a marker indicating the health of the entire world. Education is one of the most effective ways of making our world and our history more human. That's what all of you are doing. That's what all of these wonderful researchers in the collaborative, every one of them are working. Laura, Rebecca, Soyan, Veronica, Trang, Sue, Allison, Jenny, Patrick, Kate, Mary Lou, all of them are working for you. And I can't be more grateful and want you to have this as my gift, if you will, to the module. So take that picture. And some of you who can't do that, then you can also see this information about the modules there. But thank you so much for your work. I truly wish you the absolute best in the next 2 days that have been organized so beautifully, with so many of my colleagues and friends giving lectures and presentations. It is a joy to have begun this very important conference with you. Godspeed, and thank you, every single one of you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Maryann. Your passion, your commitment, and your focus on improving outcomes for all learners is always inspiring. Thank you for your expertise, your thoughts about elbow room, and your emphasis on the expansion of learning for all of us. And what really resonated with me was the notion of protecting our humanity through teaching our children. That really said something. And then really going after all areas of reading circuit and connecting them. So you have given us so much to think about. Everyone, we have our first breakout session at 10 o'clock. So you have time to look through the schedule and see who you might be interested in seeing. If you're waiting for a gamification code, it is reading. Enter that in the keynote day 1 challenge. And then remember, you can navigate to everything through the Your Schedule link on the homepage. Be sure to visit the amazing vendor booths throughout the day. There are 4 breakout sessions today. I hope you have a wonderful day full of learning, and then we'll be back all together in like the keynote format tomorrow morning. So please join as many breakouts as you can. And thank you so much, Maryann. Dr. Wolf, you are amazing, and your contributions to the field just can't be overstated. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Tammy, so much.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone. See you in the breakouts.
So, Tammy. Tammy, can you hear me?
I can, but Deidre, are we off?
I just wanted to thank you so much.